Conspiracy theories have been around since the dawn of time. Fake moon landings, real-life lizard overlords, dead Beatles, and of course, flat Earth. Brought to you by the phenomenal AJ Styles. But much like government bodies and exclusive cults, wrestling promotions are shrouded in secrecy and mystique, making them as prone to elaborate conspiracy theories as Donald Trump is to knowing more stuff better and bigly than anyone else on the planet. Some are unbelievable. Surely no one thinks Mr. America was Hulk Hogan. Others are ridiculous. Wrestling is so fake. Look how fake it is. And some are just downright heartbreaking. You mean Shane McMahon's punches aren't real after all? But every now and again, you get one that makes you think. We're not saying any of these are true, but then again, who's to say that if they were true, we wouldn't be covering them up in the first place? I'm Adam Nicholas, and these are 10 famous wrestling conspiracy theories. Number 10. Lesnar wasn't supposed to end the streak. The shocking end to Undertaker's fabled WrestleMania streak 3 years ago was more surprising than if you woke up tomorrow with your head sewn to the carpet, which is why many have suggested the bookers never actually signed off on Lesnar going over. This holds some weight for a number of reasons. The dead man suffered a severe concussion during the match, after which he was rushed to hospital for treatment. And when you throw in the fact that the Beast Incarnate is often portrayed as selfish and indifferent to wrestling tradition, it does beg the question: did Brock Lesnar pin The Undertaker while he was legitimately knocked out for his own personal glory? Paul Heyman himself suggested it last year during his An Evening with Paul Heyman show in Glasgow, before asking the crowd, is it me fucking with you, or am I telling you something you're not supposed to know? After all, who the hell could stop Big Bad Brock? Of course, the only problem here is that the 21-in-1 graphic was already on the Titantron ready to go. But what if there was someone backstage who was in on the whole thing? Number 9. Vince hates SmackDown. Monday Night Raw is Vince McMahon's baby. It's viewed inside the WWE and out as the A show to SmackDown's B. But is there really any chance in hell that Vince McMahon would deliberately sabotage the SmackDown product to make it so unwatchable that the show he pioneered back in the 90s would come out looking better than Steve Austin during the stunning years? Look at those luscious locks. Absolutely delightful. Vince drafted The Miz, Dean Ambrose, and Alexa Bliss over to Monday nights, as well as cancelling Talking Smack. To say that McMahon therefore hates SmackDown, however, seems childish and petulant. And when has Vince and Kennedy McMahon ever been any of those things? Ultimately though, he's the man in charge of both, and if one suffers, then presumably so does the other, along with WWE's bottom line as a whole. And at the end of the day, a billionaire strut really doesn't mean shit if your pockets are emptier than Oscar Pistorius' sock drawer. Number 8. Vince hates WCW stars. When you look at the WWE careers enjoyed, or rather endured, by the stars who made their name in WCW, Booker T, Goldberg, Scott Steiner, Diamond Dallas Page, to name a few, you can't help but get the feeling that the notion of one of Ted Turner's guys making a splash in the big leagues just didn't sit well with someone backstage. Now, of course, there are mitigating circumstances. Both DDP and Steiner were in their 40s when they finally signed for Vince McMahon, whilst Goldberg also left on his own accord after 1 year. The standout here is, of course, Booker T. There isn't really a logical explanation for his lack of success, other than he just didn't possess whatever it was early 2000s WWE was looking for in a new leading man. Number 7. ECW was always a WWE subsidiary. It's pretty much an open secret these days that Vince McMahon was throwing more money in the direction of ECW in the late 90s than an unhinged Jerry Lawler in a Las Vegas strip club. Vince helped Paul Heyman keep the company's head above water, but some theorists believe that ECW was actually a subsidiary of the then WWF. Vince obviously saw the continued existence of ECW as a positive thing for wrestling and his company, but there'd have been little reason for him to take over the company without explicitly bringing it under the WWE banner. Given that ECW was often credited with ushering in the Attitude Era, it's possible WWE saw Heyman's promotion as a launchpad for some of its more risky ideas, although it has to be said, castrating your rivals with a sword and intergenerational carnal activities aren't exactly WWE shying away from their own risky shit to begin with. Number 6. Savage gave Hogan his WrestleMania 9 black eye. There was something different about Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 9. Something darker. Something... oh no wait, he just had a great big fuck off black eye. That was it. Naturally, wrestling fans immediately sensed something was afoot, refusing to believe WWE's kayfabe story, Hogan being attacked by Ted DiBiase and co, or in fact their non-kayfabe story, where he'd been involved in an unfortunate jet ski accident. Instead, they theorized there'd been an altercation with his former friend Randy Savage, who'd grown resentful of the Hulkster on screen, believing him to be having an affair with his manager and actual wife, Miss Elizabeth. It's entirely plausible. The tetchy relationship between Hogan and the Macho Man is one of the industry's worst kept secrets. But beside that, we really don't have any evidence to support this one, and given how much wrestlers love to brag, you'd imagine Savage would have never stopped talking about the time he smacked the Tash right off the old peroxide Prince. Maybe it really was just a jet ski accident. Number 5. Daniel Bryan is medically cleared. We all miss Daniel Bryan. I mean, every match our super badass MMA professional, most dangerous commissioner alive, Shane McMahon, has had since his return, you can't help but think, man, I wish that was Bryan instead. But some people really miss him, to the point where they're suggesting that the SmackDown GM has, in fact, been cleared to wrestle, contrary to all the noises coming out of WWE. So why won't they let him wrestle? Give the people what they want, damn it! According to this theory, it's because the WWE brass fear putting D-Bry back in the ring would derail plans to make Roman Reigns the new face of the company, with fans bound to cheer for their favourite indie darling over The Rock's more photogenic cousin. Two rather large plot holes here, the first being that Daniel Bryan, in his short-lived pomp, was an absolute goldmine for WWE, and keeping him from competing without good reason would make absolutely no business sense at all. And on top of that, why would Bryan himself stand for it? Yes, granted, the former Ring of Honor star is under contract until 2018, but as we've seen many times before, and most recently with the impromptu departure of Neville, wrestling contracts don't really mean all that much when you're desperate to leave. Number 4, Vince McMahon is an actor. Now, Vince McMahon is an actor to some extent. He isn't actually that power-crazed, and he wouldn't really want to go one-on-one with his daughter in an I Quit match, or bring his comatose wife to the ring and watch him make out with Trish Stratus. Or would he? Some fans genuinely believe, however, that the Vince McMahon we see on our screens isn't actually Vince McMahon at all. Yes, apparently the man we see is little more than an actor that the real Vince McMahon hires to play his on-screen alter ego. Not only that, but the theory also suggests that this gives him, along with his kids, who presumably are also actors, the chance to lead a normal life in the background. Surely if anonymity was the goal, they'd have just been better going to the shop and buying some Daft Punk helmets and just be done with it. Vanny, Stephanie, Shano, Linda. Number 3, Ultimate Warrior was replaced. Some of the internet wrestling community genuinely believe that Warrior was replaced in the early 90s, after the original one died in real life. And instead of acknowledging this, the WWE brass thought, well, we still got his ring gear, maybe we just put it on somebody else. Now granted, we did have these two imposters, but the evidence for Warrior 2.0 is largely unconvincing, mainly resting on the idea that he appeared bigger and more defined when he returned in the early 90s. Because obviously working out isn't a thing, right? And I mean, we are talking about a period of wrestling synonymous with performance enhancement, so... Plus, James Hellwig, the man that we last knew as Ultimate Warrior, actually legally changed his name to Warrior, which seems like something you'd only do if you spent your whole life playing a character. Number 2, Montreal Screwjob wasn't work. The Montreal Screwjob changed WWE and the wrestling world as a whole forever, generating a crazy amount of buzz across the entire industry. Some fans, however, could smell something rotten in Denmark. Convinced this worked out far too well for all parties involved, it suggested that Bret Hart was in on the whole thing, having agreed to do Vince McMahon one last solid before his departure to WCW. What Bret actually got in return here doesn't seem fitting. By many accounts, he was pushed out of the company by the chairman in an effort to save money. Granted, the Screwjob did put more eyes on WWE's product, and Bret Hart, who was about to begin his final run in the ring with WCW, was the industry's most talked about wrestler, albeit for a short while. However, if it is true, then Vince and Bret probably deserve an Oscar each for committing arguably the biggest and greatest illusion in wrestling history. And number 1, Vince Russo, double agent. Most wrestling historians agree that Vince Russo's booking was, in part, to blame for the demise of WCW towards the end of the Monday Night Wars. The majority of them, however, and not looking at anyone specifically here, put this down to Russo's ineptitude rather than deliberate sabotage. Not everyone though. Some fans actually believe that Double O Russo, who worked for the WWF for the previous decade before jumping ship in 1999, was sent to WCW by Vince McMahon to destroy their product with wild booking decisions and backstage shenanigans. One thing that isn't entirely clear in this theory, however, is whether Russo actually knew he was a pawn in Vince McMahon's game, or whether Vince just let him go to Nitro, knowing full well that an unadulterated Vince Russo would naturally write and script his competitor into an absolute ratings catastrophe. The real conspiracy here seems to be the determination of wrestling fans to convince everyone that Vince Russo had no idea what he was doing, when he quite obviously, quite spectacularly, most definitely did.
I am defiant.
I am
defiant.
I am defiant.
I am defiant. I am the villain. We are defiant.